Hello, thank you for tuning in today. We are here with representatives from the Asset Management Focus Area at the Yale School of Management MBA for Executives program. My name is Maria Statsmani Marquez, and I serve as the Associate Director of Admissions. And it is my pleasure today as we aim to share with you more topically about the program, but really digging into a conversation about the asset management curriculum and the really distinct integrated core curriculum that the School of Management offers. So I have the rare privilege of working with Brandon, Ishil, and Julie. And I wanted to first offer a moment so that each of you could introduce yourselves and share a little bit more about what you do in your current roles and also what inspired you to get started in the area of finance. So we'll pause there. The goal in the next 45 minutes is to make sure that we're able to share more about our experiences, but then also to dive in a little bit deeper into not only the focus area, and I mentioned this before, but also the integrated core curriculum. So wanted to end there, and we'll ask questions. This is meant to be conversational, so we'll just go with the flow. All right, so please.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Colon. I'm a class of 2019, second year in the MBA for Executives at Yale School of Management. And my full time, I'm the Deputy Director of Hedge Fund Research for Makita Investment Group. We're an investment consultant that handles the portfolios for large-scale public pension funds as well as endowments and foundations. So to answer the second question of what really got me into the financial industry, I think investment consulting is an interesting space because we're working with, like I said, a lot of public pension plans who their constituents are teachers, firefighters, municipal workers, etc. And so they're sort of the lifeblood of the country and the globe. And so there was a really good opportunity to exercise sort of the societal benefits and then the analysis side, which is where the finance stuff comes in.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ishil DiPietro. I am the Vice President of State Street. I work in risk management. And my background is in risk management. Right out of grad school, I think I find myself into the mortgage-backed security world. I graduated and I found a job in mortgage-backed securities, and I didn't know what it was at the time. It was at the peak of the market, got into it, started modeling mortgage-backed and commercial-backed. And as you all know, the market crashed. I continued paying out those deals during the crash. That was an interesting time that made me more interested in risk management, how to address systemic risk. So I work for State Street Bank, which is one of the largest custodians in the world. And we are a global, significantly financial institution, so we have to, go through multiple regulations. One of them is a regulation called CCAR. That's your capital adequacy testing. So I own the qualitative portion of CCAR to become more technical in risk management. That's what I do, and I kind of found myself in finance. Out of grad school, got into the quantitative piece, and I enjoy being in it.
Great. I'm Julie Cochran. I'm also in the class of 2020 in the asset management track. I've been in the asset management industry for 20 plus years. I always like to round down. And mostly working at senior positions in marketing and client service for asset managers across the asset categories. And I started out in international equities. I moved into global fixed income. I actually had some time in private equity. And then I started my own firm in the early 2000s. And we are a placement agent. I think for those people who understand that word, we connect the asset managers to the institutional investors. So I've done that now for 15, 16 years. I came back to Yale specifically because my business partners were retiring. And I felt that this was a good time to kind of retool and make some decisions about what I wanted to do in the future.
Yeah, thank you. All very impressive backgrounds. As somebody who's worked largely in higher education, I'm always curious to hear the different variances of people who work within finance. So thank you for being here. And so we would be remiss if we didn't start with the mission, which is to educate leaders for business and society. And as you heard Brandon speak into that, and also with the global financial crisis and thinking about how to be connectors so that people are making great decisions with their wealth. We are here as a university and as an institution to ensure that we are really the best source of elevated leaders. We believe that that happens through the integrated core curriculum, but we also believe that being a very global program and organization allows our work to kind of really expand beyond the capacity that it served. So our current dean, Ted Snyder, is the co-founder of what's called the Global Network for Advanced Management. We're not going to dive too deeply into that today, but I would encourage you to look online and learn more about that. There's a number of resources all across the globe. We have 30 different partner schools in 28 different countries, and our students have access to each of those different schools, professors, and students there. And lastly, we want to be the most integrated with our home university. So as a part of being a student at the Yale School of Management, you are also a part of the Yale University Network, which extends beyond just Evans Hall and really out across New Haven into the other old campuses and even more broadly into our very global reach of alumni network. And so this is a beautiful photo of Yale. This is, I think, the new residence halls that have just been built, really quite close to Yale School of Management. If you ever get a chance to visit campus, I would certainly encourage you to take a walk through. But we are very proud of this institution. I think this is home to many Nobel laureates, certainly award-winning doctors and actors and scholars across all different areas, senators and presidents. And so when we think about, how as a school of business, we really are utilizing all of these resources, it becomes a kind of an open and maybe somewhat overwhelming experience because there's so much. And so, Ishal, I wanted to check in with you and see, what are the resources that you've tapped into across Yale, and even those that you've heard your classmates tap into.
So as you mentioned, Maria, there are lots of resources that's available. I live in Boston, and I have a really long work day, so I'm not able to come here that often, but I hear from my classmates they're able to take classes from law school, from environmental studies. Climate change is a big thing. They would like to learn both the legal aspects of it, global implications, and also the environmental pieces. So I would love to take some of those classes, and I have one more year to go, so I'm hoping to do that. But what was most useful to me was I do a lot of board-level presentations, so board committees, board-level committees, and I find it useful to take classes from a drama school, for instance. We do have a lot of workshops that after our regular classes that the university conducts, and I had taken a couple of music and drama classes, how to use your voice, how to be present, how to breathe, how to prepare for a big presentation. Those were very helpful to me.
Yeah, especially when you're speaking to a number of different constituents and being able to connect with the audience.
Yes.
I know which class you're taking because I stepped into that once and learned quite a lot. And it was also very playful. I think the professor is Grace Sandarsky, and there's a couple of, Tally Reich might be another person who does that too. So yeah, thank you. And so even though Yale is quite old, over 300 years old, Evans Hall is actually very new. We've only had Evans Hall for the last 4 years, and so right now we're beaming in from one of the classrooms in which actually all of the asset management courses are typically held. And you can see from the architecture, it's very futuristic in some ways. It's all really built of glass. If you haven't been to Evans Hall, please come and check it out. The idea here is that transparency happens within business, or at least it should, and we really aspire to make sure that we're doing as best we can with each other within the cohort, within the larger administration, and even as you walk away from the work that you do here, taking that into your own organizations as well, some of those values and beliefs. So one thing that's happening here quite soon is they are hosting the Impact Investing Conference, and so really, Evans Hall is a space used for many conferences. We have an annual healthcare conference as well. So students use our space in very many different ways, and also other industries come in to utilize the space as well as for classes. Julie and one of her teammates is very much teamed up with the international Center for Finance, which is led by our faculty director, Will Getzman, and others. And you're teamed up to really put on the second annual.
That's right. Yeah. I was fortunate to come to the first annual Impact Investment Conference last year, and I was very inspired by the people that I met and the format. And so when I had the opportunity to get involved, I really jumped at the chance, and we put together a team of a few 2019s and mostly our class of 2020 to really start framing how we wanted this conference to play out. And we got some great support from faculty, but I will say they were hands off, which at first I was like, well, can't we get some help here? But as we've progressed, I realized that in many ways they've left it to us to really figure out and navigate. And I think that's been incredibly helpful to a lot of the folks who maybe aren't as familiar with the asset management world, and to try and think through what is going to be a combination of speakers and topics that are going to be interesting, not only to our classmates, but also to the broader world, because this conference is open to the public. And it's worked out that way. We're really excited about the speakers and the topics. We framed the entire conference around the Sustainable Development Goals, which I would encourage everyone to look into. It's really become the framework for talking about impact. And our whole panels are around that. And we cut across every asset class, and we've been able to get some very, very senior people to come in and really donate their time to speak to this topic.
Yeah,
so it's great.
It's really impressive, and to know that it's been kind of an initiative led by the MBA for Executives program is really quite inspiring. And so this is kind of a little bit of a random question to that, but when you were here as a participant, what did you walk away from the conference with? Like, what was the one thing that you took away from your time that day?
Well, it did inspire me. I mean, it made me think there's a real world here of people who have been doing research, who have been, going deep into topics, and a very broad network of support, where Yale, I think the name Yale and its reputation allows it to just pull people from around the world and around every asset class. So I was very impressed that, and I did not realize that this had been so student driven. I didn't really appreciate that because it just didn't come across that way. I mean, nothing against students, but it just came across as if this had been very professionally done. And so obviously we have a high bar to live up to, but it is really, it's really remarkable that Yale has that pull, and it's really a very global pull. So, we do have one of our speakers coming from the Netherlands who runs the responsible investing for PGGM, which is one of the largest pension funds in the world. So, this is, I don't know that any school could just, make that phone call and get that kind of person to come. So that's one of the benefits of being at Yale.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I'm going to be in attendance, so
Great.
I look forward to learning more. So here we get into a little bit more about the curriculum. What I'd love for you all to take away from this slide is that 75% of the curriculum is really this integrated core, along with the advanced management courses and leadership development, as well as the self-directed study. And then the other 25% is really focused in either asset management, healthcare, or sustainability. And for the purposes of today, obviously, we're going to keep to speaking about asset management. I did want to mention, and this has already been brought up, but Brandon is in the second year, so he's taking the advanced management courses in the area of focus, as well as probably diving into some level of the self-directed study, or has other classmates who are doing so. And then Julie and Ishal are still working through the integrated core curriculum. And so when we think about the very distinctive aspect at Yale School of Management, we really look to the integrated core curriculum. What makes this very different is that we don't teach by functional aspects within business. We're really weaving those aspects throughout the curriculum, but that it's taught by organizational stakeholder perspective. And so the idea is that you take these classes, and these are the literal names of the classes that you would take, and you're able to learn more nuanced information about each of these areas, especially if you don't have a tie into them, so that you can then speak into them when you're working with those constituents within your own organization or beyond. So one example might be sourcing and managing funds, where you're really utilizing a number of different functional aspects, but largely you're learning kind of the broader mindset, how the operations of this might work, what are some of the outcomes and nuances, and of course each of you will know more about that.
We just finished the final.
Did you just finish the final? Okay. So what was your takeaway from this? Like maybe the biggest takeaway from this class coming from a risk perspective?
So I just ran into the professor at the hall. These finals are very interesting in a way that it makes you think, right? So it gives you this general things that you can hear between two investors talking, or you run into two people at your firm and they talk about different parts of corporate finance, and you put it into the context given the information in the class. So I had taken corporate finance before, pieces of accounting, operations, strategy, but linking them all together and almost giving you a different perspective, a lens to look at different situations is what I took away from the course, apart from, refreshing my knowledge on corporate finance and risk and looking at things from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to dig into this a little bit more, and I'm going to go back just a slide so that we can see all the classes here, because there are, I guess my biggest question is, given that you're all coming from different areas of finance, and this is really the core curriculum that you take during your first year, how does this apply to your roles or your organization? How has it helped you? So I'm asking a lot of different questions. Please feel free to jump off wherever.
Yeah, no, I think I want to go back to sourcing and managing funds really quick, because I think it's important to point out that whether you're an analyst for an asset manager, or you're the CFO for a nonprofit, or you are in the C-suite for another consumer brands company, I think the beauty of this class was that regardless of what your perspective was, you were either A, sharpening your skills, or B, learning new skills. And so it wasn't that, oftentimes you can find corporate finance courses that leave people out of the equation, given that they don't work in that profession, or they might not be interested in that particular domain. But the way that the sourcing and managing funds class is structured, it's structured, again, from the stakeholder perspective, so that if you are sitting in corporate finance, you get a perspective of someone that's sitting in marketing and how they might interpret some of that information. And a lot of that is organic through being in teams and through your classmates. But I think that's really the importance of a class like sourcing and managing funds, and quite frankly, the importance of disaggregating what the curriculum is into the stakeholder perspective. So
Yeah, I agree 100%, because, I can't tell you how many times, something simple like WACC, weighted average cost of capital, would come up in conversations, and you're like, well, what does that really mean? How do I get to that number? How are people using it? If you don't really understand how to get to that number, you can't ask a question about it. And so a lot of the courses are all about what are the right questions to ask. And in order to be able to ask good questions, you need to know a lot more. And I think that's what this whole thing has taught me, at least, is that for every single discounted cash flow or whatever, let's take it back. Let's really look at it and build it back up. Don't just take it for granted. Go into the components of how you come at and why we're using discounted cash flow, and why do we use weighted average cost of capital. Not just anybody can go and do the formula, but I think it's really one step above that, which is why are we using these formulas, why are they important, and how are they helpful.
Curious about one of the classes that I feel many people who are in finance kind of feel really excited about is the investor class with Professor Iverson. So I'm wondering, what was it like taking that class, being kind of, I'm assuming, like already leaders within the industry?
Well, I think first and foremost, Professor Ibbotson is sort of a legend in asset management in general. So anytime you get to take a course with someone who's literally written a lot of the financial theory. That's sort of going to pique your interest. Well, at least it is for someone that's coming from asset management for sure. But that class, you know, I think, to be fair, it's going to teach someone who maybe isn't in asset management a lot of the foundational knowledge that they need to be able to continue with advanced management courses. But it's also got enough information in there for even the most advanced individuals in asset management to make sure that they're sharpening those skills as well. Besides the fact it gives you an introduction to Professor Ibbotson, and I know personally people who have taken advantage of self-directed studies with working with Professor Ibbotson. In fact, a member from the class of 2018, who in fact I used to be a colleague of, he actually went on to launch his own fund based on some of the self-directed study that he did with Professor Ibbotson. And so that's kind of bringing things full circle. Yes, the investor class is a great class. Professor Ibbotson's a legend, but that gives you sort of the life cycle of what you can do in the program.
Totally agree.
So that brings up another point, is kind of the connection that you have with your professors and what kind of opportunities there are. So can you share, Ishol, what opportunities you've had to connect with professors here, or Julie?
Do you want to go first?
I just kind of cold called right then.
So I think the interactions with professors are interesting, right? I find I'm very available. That's what I really like. Whenever there's a question comes at work and you need to reach out to a professor to pick up their brains, they're readily available. They don't mind helping you think through a problem, because we do, a lot of times we face with new problems that are new to us at work, and we need some type of structure and to think through the problem. So I think my interactions with the professors had always been in that level. I mean, interestingly, we didn't talk about these classes, but like the employee class. My company currently went through a large reduction of the workforce, and that affects all of us. So I'm in risk management, but I need to also manage employee motivation, employee involvement. So this is a part of the strategy. We are doing a lot of change within the bank, so I need employees buy-in. So classes like that gives me the tools to be able to go back to work and implement some of the strategies that I'm being taught of. So those type of interactions I found really useful. That is not immediately in the asset management curriculum, but it's a part of the integrated curriculum.
That's really helpful. Just in general, to think about how you're applying this once you go back to work on Monday, which is like something that we always say. So to hear it actually in full use with all their classes outside of what you would consider really appealing for asset management.
I think there's an important aspect to emphasize here too, is that professors are academics, of course, and they all have very well built out networks. But in my 2 years here, what I've noticed is that they appreciate sort of the practitioner's perspective. And the fact that we're working in our day jobs and applying some of the things that we're learning from the academic perspective and giving them feedback, direct feedback, I think that lends itself to their availability. They want to hear how things are going in practice and get some feedback that may refine their research or just add additional perspective to the classroom. So.
Well, and the only thing I would say is that, like, again, with sourcing and managing funds, you have, in the case of our class, 2 amazing professors working together, and I think that every single class has a different makeup. And so they don't know. They come into a class and they may have some idea of the background of the people, but I think they actually start to move and change how they deliver the curriculum based on the people that they're teaching to. And that's what I've noticed is that depending on the feedback they're getting and the questions that they're getting, they can shift very quickly and either go deeper or not as deep, depending on the knowledge and interest of the class. That's what I've taken away.
There's a few other anecdotes I'll just add to the professor availability. I know that one of my classmates, he's actually he works at Citibank, and he brought Professor Ibbotson to one of his conferences just to speak to his entire staff, and so to give a lecture on something like that. So that is the level, I think, of interaction that a lot of people have had with the professors here.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I get to meet with them because I live in New Haven, just, at the local bakery, which is nice. Get feedback. Thank you so much. So, Brandon, I feel like you're going to be placed on the spot here for the next few because we're talking about year 2 curriculum. And so within our program, we don't offer a ton of structure, a ton of flexibility because there's so much structure. We have a couple of options for you to make choices between financial reporting or entrepreneurship and new ventures in the second year, and then managerial controls or policy design. And then, of course, there are 5 classes that you would take with your full cohort. So I think the question here is, how do these advanced management courses really enhance what you've already learned in the integrated curriculum? What's the difference that you see between the two different sets?
Yeah, certainly. And not to call it the slides, there's one that's missing, and I think it's the executive, which is a capstone class that I think that as you're coming off of your first year, you've got all these individual tools that have some semblance of connection, and you're trying to figure out, okay, as I go through as a senior executive at my firm, how do I make sure that I integrate all the stuff that I've learned? And then you walk into year 2 and you've got the executive course, which is exactly that. It sort of coalesces everything that you've learned, and it forces you to reach back into the first year curriculum and use a lot of the skills that you learned in those courses and puts them together in a case study format, which I think is a really good way to introduce year 2 and kind of speaks to the way that year 2 curriculum is designed. We've been talking a lot about sourcing and managing funds, but corporate finance is very much an extension of that, and that's a phenomenal class. And if you went a couple layers deep in sourcing and managing funds, you continue to go deeper in corporate finance. And so it really gives people the opportunity to, hey, I really liked sourcing and managing funds. I wish I had actually more of that. Okay, well, you'll get that in corporate finance. Hey, I really liked customer with Sudhir. How do I get more of that? Well, in marketing strategy, you get a little bit more of that. And so they're just a little bit of a deeper dive, and I think it's set up in a way that isn't overwhelming. And what I mean by that is you get the foundation in year 1, and then you really dig in year 2.
That's interesting because you also bring up a really good point about everything kind of coalescing through the executive, and then also this idea of working within your team on case studies. And we do case studies very differently here as compared to other schools. And so I'm wondering, how would you describe the case study method here?
Yeah, I think they call them raw case studies, and that's very much how I would describe them. There's an abundance of information that's put in a way where you can jump from topic to topic. And so your traditional case study very much has a narrative. You start, it tells you what the problem might have been, it frames it, it tells you what they attempted to do or what they did wrong, it gives you a bunch of information, and then kind of leaves it open-ended. I would say that the way that the Yale case study method is, it's all of it's open-ended. And that kind of speaks to the way that we set it, or the way at least our classmates, the diversity of our classmates, is you can go deep on one area of the case study, or another classmate might grab onto another aspect, the analytical aspect, and another classmate in your team might grab onto the marketing aspect. And so it allows it to be modular, which I think supports the way that the curriculum is designed.
Also more like reality in business.
Right, that's a good point.
Right.
That's exactly what I was going to say too. At work, we are giving a lot of disassembled data. You're given an issue, a problem. Now you have to solve it. So the case study almost gives you that type of structure. How do I think about a problem? How do I approach the problem the right direction? How do I collect data? Because in the raw studies, you get financials and you get analyst reports. You get all of these different data points, and now you have to consume it. It's not in this, in Harvard case studies, there's a table, and you get information from that table. You don't reach to other resources. At work, you have to be getting your data from different sources. I think I really find the raw studies useful. It is very time consuming. You spend a lot of time working through the information on the website, but very useful tool.
It's a really great point. I wish someone packaged up all the information I needed to solve every problem every day, but that's not really the way it works. So.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of hard work and a lot of reading and watching and digesting. Thank you for that. So this is a picture here. We have electives every Thursday night, and there's actually going to be an elective in this room after we're done here. And Timothy Geithner, who is often or sometimes...
Dartmouth grad.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. All right. I didn't,
My
I did
class.
not know that. Huh. Okay. All right. So he taught an elective on the global financial crisis, which at the time was really important and influential. So this is just him in the classroom, and I think he's often here on campus. I don't know if any of you have had, well, you may have had an opportunity to.
I haven't run into him yet.
You haven't? Okay. In school, I know I have like a million questions, of course, but we'll stop there. So moving on to the focus area and the classes that are in year 2, Professor Will Getzman is the faculty director. He is also a Yale man through and through. He is a Yale undergrad, and I think he was in his undergrad while the Yale School of Management was being built. He then earned his MBA and then went on to a PhD. So he's leading the International Center for Finance, and also really curates the courses here. And I believe he teaches the Portfolio Management Alternatives class.
He does.
And so I had the opportunity to hear him talk about the growth and the changes of Yale SOM since he's been at Yale, and he really spoke to the mission always being the mission. It was always intended to have business have an impact that's positive on society through organizations. So it was interesting to hear that consistency because, you know, organizations change all the time and markets change, and what do you do to kind of keep up, or do you stay true to your core values? And so it was nice to hear him considering this organization as one that would really be firm in what it believes. So with that, I don't know how many courses you've taken to date. Are there any courses that you have not taken?
On this?
On this slide.
No.
No, because he's going to graduate
Nope.
soon.
Wow, okay.
No,
Almost
actually,
done.
we're in the middle of Risk Perspectives right now, which is taught by David Belmont, who happens to be the head of risk at BlackRock. And so that's really unique that we get access to him, and he's been incredibly available after class. I've actually been setting up meetings with him in New York, and so it's a really good opportunity. But outside of that, no, we've taken all these classes. And what I'll just say one thing about Professor Getzman, and I think this is going to be very much on brand from what we've been talking about, is that he's done an incredible job of accepting feedback on the cohort and sort of what the students would like to see here. He's done an incredible job of, and I know we touched on a little bit with the colloquium, getting individuals that, you know, quite frankly, like we wouldn't be able to get probably individually. It's people like Cliff Asness at AQR, David Swenson here at the endowment. And so he's been an incredible advocate for the program.
Wow. I'm wondering, I had multiple questions about that, and I was also thinking about the colloquium speakers, but before we jump on to that, I wanted to learn a little bit more. What's been your favorite class so far?
They're all different. Look, I was a psychology major in undergrad, right? And I think Yale is famous for the behavioral finance aspect. And you have Professor Barbaras, who's one of sort of the best scholars in the behavioral finance space. And to have him teach the course, I just thought was a pretty nice treat for everyone in the asset management track. So I would gravitate towards that because just behavioral finance is sort of the intersection between psychology and asset management. So I spent my career in asset management, and I, studied psychology for 4 years. So I would gravitate towards that.
Yeah. What are you most excited about, Ishil?
I'm looking forward to behavioral finance. A lot of things that we do is related to behavior, how humans interact, how we design financial tools, even financial instruments, right? And AI, machine learning, it's going towards psychology, how we make sense of behavior. So I'm looking forward to that class. I have a bunch of favorites so far. I really liked classes that I didn't think I would like marketing classes. I had no background in marketing. I was more like a quant person. I have an economics degree focused on quant type of courses, so I have an easier time with those. So those were, economics, statistics, classes were okay. It was a refresher, but I like employee, I like customer, I like classes that I didn't know much about. So those were more challenging, but I'm also enjoying them quite a bit. Electives were also really good. Yeah, there are lots of favorites. What do you like?
What I like and what I'm looking forward to. I would agree with you. I have a more generalist background. I was a government major undergraduate. So something like state and society comes naturally. I guess to me, I'm naturally like to write and read and research. So those type of things are my comfort zone. So getting out of the comfort zone is actually something that is the reason I came here, to sort of shake things up. So I guess some of the quantitative side of it is kind of compelling, because I feel like, it's nice to be able to walk away and say, hey, I know that. Or at least I have a better understanding of it. And again, from looking ahead, I would agree, behavioral finance is sort of like coming to an institution that's well known in that. And I think that's incredibly fortunate to be able to do that.
I mean, when you consider the fact that Robert Schiller won a Nobel Peace Prize for establishing behavioral economics in here, and kind of what he's done for the legacy of the university.
Absolutely. And with such humility, too. So I hope that you're taking away that these courses are both broad and also quite technical. So you have really, and you can help me with this a little bit, the behavioral finance, entrepreneurial finance, and the future of global finance are really kind of these broad theoretical frameworks that you're looking at, whereas when you get into investment management, risk perspective, and portfolio management, you're diving a lot more deeply into the actual skill building and tools and probably quantitative portion.
Yeah. What's great about behavioral finance is that it's moving from a more theoretical subject to actually like applicable subject. So there's some sort of hard and fast rules that quite frankly, as a person that evaluates hedge funds on a day-to-day basis, that they're implementing. And that can give you a really good advantage in if you have pursue a career in asset management. But you're absolutely correct that in entrepreneurial finance and the future of global finance, you talk about sort of global perspective on how markets are moving, why capital markets were established the way that they were, and you get that historical perspective. Whereas in investment management, risk perspectives, and portfolio management, you really are digging into the methodologies behind how we're evaluating certain investments, how you're putting pen to paper in terms of valuation, how to become a better portfolio manager if that's what you would like to be. But that is definitely much more of the technical side.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering about that. And I should sit in on more classes to gain that. But one thing that sometimes I get to do is sit in on a colloquium speaker series, and Brandon, you mentioned this before, so I'm going to ask Ishul really what has been the highlight for you in this first year through this speaker series.
I think I will go with Carla Harris. She has a really amazing personality, and she talked about her journey through the corporate as a female. So I think it really resonated with me, and her, her moving from an analyst role, going into an executive role. So I think that will be my pick, Carla Harris.
I want to ask everybody, but I know that we also have time to go through some other slides here. Okay. So now we're at the point where we get to talk a little bit more about, we get to talk about our classmates and also alums. So within the admissions department, we're really seeking a broad range of profiles of those who are servicing the financial industry. And so what you can see is a few of our alumni and one of our current students here. So Jamila Abston, class of 17, she actually came from Atlanta, and she was working at the SEC as a regulator, and within her second year within the program, negotiated to partner at EY, and so she works within the wealth management division there. And then we had somebody traveling all the way from Norway, Chris Roberstad, who is class of 18. He is a traditional portfolio manager, and I think that's really where he wants to stay. I'm not sure if there's been any transition since his graduation, but I know that he'll be coming back for alumni reunion this May, so we'll learn more then. But certainly was here every other weekend, made the commitment within the travel, and so we do have a number of international, truly international students traveling to campus every other weekend, as well as those coming from outside of the Eastern Corridor. And then lastly, Daniel Coutinho, who works at the IFC with the World Bank. He is traveling from DC. And I'm curious, Brendan, just in terms of like his background and contributions to the cohort, can you share a little bit more about?
Daniel's phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. Yeah, he has an interesting perspective because, and certainly what he does on a day-to-day basis is kind of embodies the whole mission, which is the nexus between business and society. The World Bank's mission is to sort of propel the emerging markets to be developed markets. So he's constantly, I don't want to speak for his job, but he's constantly looking at opportunities for the World Bank to invest in infrastructure, for an example, in third world countries or emerging markets. And so, what I would just characterize in general is that when we're in classes with individuals like Daniel, is that you learn a ton from the professor, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if I had to put a percentage on how much I learned from the questions and responses from your cohort, it's probably 50-50, because you have individuals like Daniel who are able to put context onto things, like the case studies that we're doing, why someone might be looking at a case in state and society, why, what might be the sort of fundamental backing behind that. So I think that just kind of speaks to the diversity of the careers in the cohort.
And we also have pop sessions, right? We do have panel of peers on Friday mornings. And it is designed for us to learn about our classmates, the current classmates, and the year ahead of us. So 2019 and 20 had been doing a lot of panels. I don't know how many they had done, but we group people based on their professions. So we had doctors talk about their work. We had people who are in sales talk about their jobs. We had hedge fund managers. Those are very interesting, and you actually learn about your classmates at a depth that you wouldn't have been able to maybe if the cases weren't presented in class, and then you'll find out people that you might be very interested to hear more about. So I think those are giving you opportunities to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really like what you both are saying about just the diversity of the classroom and how different perspectives and voices are really important to shared learning. And the POP, the panel of peers, has been such a great addition. This is something that has been very entrepreneurial from a couple of members of the class of 2019, and we hope that it's a continued legacy. It really does kind of add to that, the ethos and the spirit of the community here about this not being a transactional program, right? That people really want to learn about each other and develop those relationships and figure out, where the connections are so that you're further expanding in your own leadership, but also, who knows? I mean, really, there's great opportunities for creating new business or partnering in business together. And so this is a beautiful picture of the class of 2020. And there's, of course, as Ishil said, doctors and lawyers and people coming from all parts of different industry. And so while I'll give you a bit of demographics here, Julie, if you wouldn't mind speaking to a couple of the classmates that you've been really surprised about or interested to learn more about.
Well, it is a broad range, and one of the reasons I came here to this program was that I think that the intersection between healthcare, sustainability, and asset management is getting narrower and narrower, and knowledge about what's happening in the healthcare industry and is incredibly important no matter what you're doing, either just as an individual or if you're, for instance, in venture capital and looking to invest in healthcare. Sustainability is the kind of issue which I think goes across, again, all three cohorts. So what I'm looking forward to is getting to know sort of this next level as we sort of flesh out the three different tracks. Hopefully we'll have opportunity to come back together and share. But so far it's been really helpful to hear from all three groups, not just asset management. And not only that, we have a range of ages and experience, and I find that I'm learning from people who are extremely senior in business and who have been doing this for 10 or 15 years, and also people who are maybe 10 years into their careers. And I wouldn't necessarily have thought that coming in, right? Not that I thought I knew it all, but it's very, very refreshing to hear from someone who's 30 years old about their experiences and what they're going through. So I don't want to single out any individual, but I have a great learning group, and we have a range of backgrounds and experiences, and that's just given even more amplified the experience here by having a learning team that is so diverse, both in terms of age and experience.
Thank you.
To add to that, we do have multiple, assignments that we do with our learning teams, and I think the way that they're structured is very interesting. You get a lot of, you get a group of people who are, focused on quant in their work. You get a lot of people getting, focused on marketing piece. I mean, we do have fashion designers, we do have a cardiologist, so there is a very interesting dynamic there, and to your point, Julie, I think you learn quite a lot of interesting stuff that you wouldn't be able to learn in a regular work environment. When I look back at my work and risk management at State Street, people are similar. They do have graduate degrees, they're coming from similar backgrounds, they do have years of experience which is similar to yours. I think getting out of that organization and coming over here is very refreshing, as Julie said.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in perspective, I'll just walk you through my team and kind of what we do. How often are you going to get a fundraiser, a partner at an advertising firm, a radiologist, an asset manager in one room to talk about Walmart? Probably not very often, right?
Yeah.
And so that's pretty unique.
So we have a couple of parting questions for you, Brandon. So as you're stay in that mode. So our hope on the admissions front is really to ensure that the class is really as uniquely diverse as possible, and that there are many different voices that are being heard, so that I'm going to call it magic and go out there and say that, but so that this learning can really take place within the class. And so we hope that you've heard that we are really a community of purpose. We believe that our students are not only inspired, but also inspiring, that they're incredibly passionate about what they do. They are mission driven. They come in with the belief that they can serve on a greater level and have a positive influence, not only on their own organizations, but on those communities, and really how that reaches out beyond into society. So Brendan, I want to ask you, as you're embarking on graduation day coming up, what for you has been the most transformational? And I'm putting that word in your mouth, and I don't mean to, but I want to ask, what?
Yeah, no, I think I get the sentiment. There's something that you touched on there is this opportunity sort of gives us a great platform, and we're all sort of indebted to the school and our careers, et cetera, and it's important that we give back. And so one example is someone in our class started a mentoring program for all the other the degree programs, the MAM in particular. And so that was sort of our way of saying, look, we are much further in our career. The MAM program is targeted at individuals who are a lot younger. How can we figure out a way to pair with them so we can offer internships or prospective job opportunities, et cetera? And so the way it's been transformational has been that I've seen a lot of people who are very busy and very successful in their own right take the time to give back and do certain things like that. And so that kind of sticks with you, and hopefully it will stick with everybody who engages in the program for a long time.
Thank you. So we're here kind of wrapping up our time together, and I know that we will have, I'm going to share with the next steps for anybody else who wants to learn more. If you go online, you can certainly set up a call with us by submitting your pre-assessment or a resume, and then we'll review it and get back to you. You can come to an in-person information session on campus, or you can send us an email with any questions that you might have. So as we round out our time together, any parting thoughts? What would you like to say to people who are researching the program, considering an MBA specifically coming from finance?
You know, this is not specific to finance, but just into the program in general. One of the strategic objectives is to integrate with the whole university. And I having researched full-time programs prior to landing on the MBA for executives, it was very clear that sort of the social cohesiveness was a really big important part of doing that 2 years in the program. And then having researched other MBA for executives or executive MBA programs, I got the sense they were a little bit more transient and felt a little transactional. And what I will just say as a sort of a pledge for this program is that we really do integrate this program with the broader university. Everyone here has talked about other classmates who have either taken classes at other colleges or in other programs who have taken the time to come to campus in the off days. And so that's very much promoted by staff, faculty, through various ways. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear as part of the program.
That's not where I thought you were going. I thought you were going to go to more of the social side of the experience.
I'll let you take care of that.
I'm not the social chair, but I will say that our social chairs do a very good job of bringing us together and getting everyone being very inclusive. And I think that for a lot of people who travel from a far distance and don't have access to the campus, it's really, really helpful, because I think that what I can remember back in the day when all my friends went off to business school and then they came out and I said, well, you know, what'd you learn? And they all said it wasn't really about that. It was all about the network. And so you'll hear this running theme, which is it is also about the network. And the only way to develop that network is to spend time with people. So I do think that this program is well designed to give us ample time to get to know our colleagues and classmates and to hopefully build lifelong friendships.
I mean, tagging to Brandon and Julie's points, you're going to be committing, like, if I was to advise myself a year ago, you would be committing a lot of time to the program, a lot of money. So before making that decision, you know, you will be comparing different programs. I went to another business school before this, so I had a starting point to compare programs. Come into the campus and experience the environment, interact with other students and see what they tell you, because that's what I did when I was doing my comparison. And as Brandon's point, it felt very transactional, and I didn't want to get another just MBA degree. I wanted to have the whole experience of being a part of the MBA program. So
Thank you all so much. It has been tremendous to work with each of you, kind of from point one to where you're sitting now and even to graduation. And I know that the work that you're doing currently and what you'll do in the future will always be well represented as a part of this program. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful few more weeks, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you, everybody.